Hey, everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's military show, where every first Monday we talk military history with Mike Guardia, who is an award-winning author, a military historian, and a U.S. Army veteran. And along with many other books, Mike is the author of the widely acclaimed biography, Hal Moore, A Soldier Once and Always, and it chronicles the life of Lieutenant General Harold G. Moore, whose battlefield leadership was popularized by the film We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson. And Mike was recently named Author of the Year by the Military Writers Society of America. And we're so happy he's been on our show for years. And this is the first time we get to announce it. We're going to have every first Monday of the month, we're going to have him on the show. And today he is joining us with his latest book. It's called Danger Forward, The Forgotten Wars of General-Paul-F-Gorman. You can get on Amazon now or go to his website. You'll see all the other books. I can't keep up with how many. Go to MikeGuardia.com. So welcome back, Military Mike. How are you?
Hey, Lisa. Hey, Nancy. I'm doing great. Always great to be on the show. Happy Thanksgiving and a happy Black Friday to you both.
And holidays, yes, because this is during December 6th. I know today's Black Friday, but well, apparently we all don't care about how much our TV sets are. No, we're all here. No, but yeah, the holidays are coming up. Excited about your first Monday show coming up, and Paul Gorman to talk about him. I know you've been talking about this book coming out for a while now, and
Correct.
Nancy grabbed hold of it, and she keeps running in. It's one of those books every few chapters. Did you know he did this? Did you? He's a badass. And sorry, but I don't know how his family's going to feel me saying that, but that's what
I'm
Nancy
sure they'd
says.
agree.
He's a warrior. He was like a real warrior. Like
smart guy.
Yeah.
Really smart.
How did you first find out about Paul Gorman?
So let's see. The first I actually heard of Paul Gorman, I want to say it was around 2014 or 2015. I actually came across his name while I was doing research for Crusader. That was the book on Don Starry. And I came across Gorman's name as one of the intellectual giants who was helping to rebuild the Army in the wake of the post-Vietnam malaise. And I knew that he did. I know that he did some very important things with the U.S. Army's Training and Doctrine Command in trying to revitalize the Army's training methods and trying to get a solid curriculum that was performance-based instead of just metrics-based. And I knew about him only in the terms of what he accomplished within that small 4-year window when he was helping to rebuild the Army, but I really didn't dig in deep into what he did beyond that. I just figured that he was another, strong intellectual giant who was helping to rebuild the Army throughout the 70s. And then fast forward to the fall of 2018, when I was giving a presentation at the Colin Powell Leadership Academy, and the professor of military science there, he said, "Mike, I read your book on Crusader, but let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of a guy named Paul Gorman?" And I said, "Yeah, I came across his name while I was writing that book on Don Starry." And he said, "Well, Mike, he's still with us, and he did so much more beyond what people typically think he did at TRADOC. Here, let me tell you about some of the things that he's done." He said, "Well, Paul Gorman, for one, he's a 1950 West Point graduate. He had his first taste of combat in the hilltop battles of Korea. And Mike, did you also know that he was the commander of American forces at the Battle of Bong Trang? That was the 3-day firefight between the U.S. Army and those VC battalions that made headlines. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for that. And Mike, did you also know that he was on the Paris Peace delegation and he was the principal architect of the Pentagon Papers?"
That's
and
crazy.
I said, "God, I had no idea he did any of that. What?" Yeah, and so he also went on to tell me more about what he had accomplished. And he said, not only that, he stayed in the military, of course, after trying to rebuild the Army, and he ended up commanding an infantry division forward stationed in West Germany. But not only that, he was also the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, Southcom, during the early part of the 1980s. And he was commanding Southcom while we had troops in El Salvador, while we were actively supporting the Contras in Nicaragua, and also when American forces invaded Grenada. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, he's done so much throughout his lifetime. I mean, from the hilltops of North Korea to the halls of the Pentagon, to the jungles of Nicaragua. How come I've never heard of this guy outside of the few years that he spent with TRADOC? I mean, it's just, I mean, it was mind blowing. I was telling myself, I have to meet this guy. I have to get a story down on paper. And that is the roundabout way of how I ultimately came to the project.
Did you meet him?
We have never met in person, but we have done a lot of Zoom interviews. Unfortunately, we started the interview process just a few months before the pandemic hit, and given the fact that he's currently residing in a senior center, the travel restrictions and the visitation restrictions being what they are, we never had a chance to meet in person. But even those Zoom meetings that we have, I mean, just an incredible energy that he gives off. And even today, at the age of 94, I mean, he's still just going strong, still sharp as any 30-year-old I've met. I mean, seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
He's an amazing person. I mean, if you read the book, you climb into this guy's mind and how organized he can make things. Like even there's one part in the book you're talking about how the ammunitions were stored, and it would take 12 hours for the guys to go in and get the ammunition they needed. And he's like, well, that's stupid. Now I'm going to fix that. And, it gets it down to like 2 to 4 hours to pull out the ammunition just by thinking how things should be properly stored so that when you need something fast, you can get it. So he kind of goes back to the basics of every single problem and fixes the problem to ensure the outcome that he wants. I mean, and not very many people really have the wherewithal to think it through and then make it happen. That's what impressed me, is like he'd see a problem, think it through. Oh, this is how it should be done. And he would make it happen. Amazing.
Yeah. He is one of the most gifted problem solvers that I've ever spoken to. I mean, just to hear his stories of how he would deconstruct this. And, I really think that shines a light on the fact that this isn't really something that can be taught. I don't think problem solving and that type of critical thinking is something that you can learn in a classroom. I think it's something that experience either teaches you, or it's something that you just have an innate talent for, and then your experiences build upon that and they expand that talent over time. But yeah, I mean, just incredible how he could deconstruct these problems. And not only that, how he could also motivate those people, not only those who served under him, but inspire those who were working with him at the time. That I really think is the sign of a true leader, to be able to problem solve on that level while simultaneously inspiring those not only beneath you, but those who are working in a lateral sense alongside you.
Yeah, because I can imagine there's always going to be the few that have a jealousy problem with it, who want to one up the other person so they look better, all those kind of things that happen when you have a bunch of humans together. No matter whether it's in the service or not in the service, when you put a lot of people together, competition comes out, and there's healthy competition and not so healthy. But he just seemed like a person who, I'm going to deal with the problem and I'm not going to stop till it's the way it should be. And just, it's amazing what he's done.
I think it's interesting with what you've been writing over the years. I know you get into here's the F-14 or the F-15 and the armor and the artillery and all of that, and but you always, no matter what, bring the human connection into those who serve in the military. And I think, as readers and what you see on the news, we always forget the human. This is human. They're human beings, and I feel like sometimes we have that disconnect, and you are always bringing that to the forefront and making it very accessible for those who are in the military and understand all the lingo, and history buffs who know the different wars, and then people like us who go, damn, I didn't know that happened, and make it accessible that we understand more than the headlines that the news give us and their opinions. There's this getting to know what people went through serving, like in Vietnam, Korea, like you're saying. Did writing, all that you've read 3 books on Hal Moore now.
Mhm.
and all the other stories, uh, bringing all these generals and lieutenants to life in your books, and then writing about Paul Gorman now. Did it help that you've done all that backlog of writing and understanding those wars? I know you've got degrees and master degrees and teaching and history and all of that, but writing this book, did it help having all of that background to be able to do the breadth of work that Paul Gorman has done?
Oh, it sure did. It
Yeah.
absolutely did. I found that the more stories I write and the more human elements that I incorporate within them, I really think it helps me in the sense that I start to see trends in how these leaders act, and I see trends in how they approach the same problem, and it really helps me. I think it helps me tell a story in a more convincing sense and in a more intimate setting that will resonate with the reader, to say, okay, well, now I have this person that I'm presenting, and I'm presenting his story against the backdrop of similar stories that I've told. And I can tell you that, his experiences here are within the context of what so many other people like him were feeling at that exact same time. And how the outcome of that particular conflict or the outcome of that particular situation was kind of up in the air, and it was uncertain. And how those universal qualities that each of these leaders and heroes and individuals have, see them through to victory. And the victory that Paul Gorman has over here might look a little bit different than what was achieved by Donald Blackburn or Hal Moore over here, but you see those parallels. And I think the downstream effect of that is you've made a story that really grabs hold of the reader and says, well, hey, this is a person who at the end of the day isn't all that dissimilar from me, and a person who could very easily be my neighbor for all I know.
And it's inspiring to not let a bad day get in your way.
Right.
You're not allowed to have that happen. Like we were talking about that with pilots the other day, the last show. It's like, you're not allowed to have a bad day. You have to go and you have to fix whatever's going on at you and make decisions and think and realize it's lives at whatever decision you make, right? Nancy, you were talking about in one of the many times you kept running in going, dude, you gotta check this out. You said that, going from, growing up in the Vietnam era, you really got a better idea of what happened in the Vietnam War and Korea than what you lived, as a civilian, seeing what was going on through the news. And so your understanding changed.
Yeah, the whole thing, in the mid 60s, coming out of high school, and everybody's, having protests, some for the Vietnamese war, some against it, mostly against it, and not having any real way of understanding what was actually going on. You couldn't trust the newspapers because they made no sense. Your teachers at school didn't want to talk about it. Your parents really didn't know anyway. At least mine didn't. They were like, ooh. So it was really hard because you saw your classmates going off to a war that nobody really seemed to be able to explain. And so reading your book, I was like, oh, so that's what it was. Oh, so that was, because for years I just thought, okay, well, it was just, we had dumb leaders at the time. That's how I summed it up. We had dumb politicians who made
okay, here we go.
decisions, and that's it.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, so that's how I felt about it. And then I read your book, I'm like, oh wow, look at that. Oh, I didn't know that. And it's not like I spent a lot of time researching it, because I had my young life to get on with, and I was busy, and I just was like glad when it was over. That's pretty much how
everyone was.
Yeah, just glad that it was over, and please don't do it again, because you had so many people. We never should have gone there, never should have been there. And I don't think anybody who was talking at the time that was really very vocal actually had any idea what they were talking about. They were just loud about it, but nobody seemed to know.
Kind of like today.
Yeah, with Afghanistan. I know we're going to talk a lot about Afghanistan on their next segment coming out January 3rd, everybody. But it does connect. Is there a parallel? And we see a lot of people talk about that there's a parallel between what happened in Vietnam and Afghanistan.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. So getting into what was going on in the army and he deciding it has to be rebuilt. Tell us about that, where
Yeah.
he decided this needs to change. And then don't other people say, no, you're not allowed to change. Don't, recreate the wheel. Doesn't that happen?
Right. Well, I think it was a bit easier to get the ball rolling on change because I think to anyone who was paying at all attention to what was happening, not only in the Army, but what was happening, throughout American society as a whole, and just how savagely public opinion had turned against the war. I think everyone who was paying any bit of attention could earnestly look at the situation and say, gosh, there really needs to be some changes made here. When we have at least this amount of the Army who is coming in without a high school diploma, when we have soldiers who are deserting, when we have soldiers who are attacking and even killing their leaders, when we have, upwards of, 30 to 40% of soldiers in any given unit who are admitting to drug use and, who are showing up at work higher than a kite. And, then there's no system in place. Right. Yeah. And, and when there's no system in place to get rid of these bad apples. And not only that, you have an American public that's hostile towards us. Well, gosh, we really need to fix the situation here. We need to increase our combat readiness, and we need to have these control mechanisms in place, not only to keep bad apples out, but also do some realistic training that is going to make us combat effective in the field. So I think it was easier for him to get the ball rolling on that. And when he finally got to the forefront of doing it, he had a very big support mechanism behind him saying, okay, well, Paul, here's what we need to accomplish. So I'm giving you a very wide berth in which to operate. So find out what the problems are, give me ideas on how to fix them, and no ideas off limits. I can be a sounding board. Let's find out what works. Let's find out what doesn't work so we can make this change happen. And I think going into it, they all knew that the change wasn't going to happen overnight. They said, okay, it took us 10 plus years of fighting in Vietnam, 10 plus years of social and a lot of political unrest to get to this point. It's probably going to take us about that long, maybe even longer to fix the problem, but let's at least get some ideas down on paper. So one of the first things he did was he said, okay, well, I need to look at how soldiers are training. If I'm going into each one of these training centers and 80% of the training is happening inside of a classroom, well, that's probably not the best way to do business. What I need to do is I need to get soldiers in the field. I need to get them training under realistic conditions, under realistic scenarios that are going to replicate not only what they'll see in combat, but also replicate what the future threats might be. Because one of the things that Gorman commented on, he said, the Army is very good at training to win the last war that it fought. It has a bit of trouble projecting what the anticipated threats are going to be. He said that, he also said that when he was a staff officer in, I think it was the 1950s, could have been the early 60s, but he said a lot of the training that I sat in on was geared towards, trying to win some of the battles that we had seen on the plains of Europe in World War II. And, and also what the Marines had seen in the amphibious operations in the Pacific. And he said, that's not dissimilar to what other generations were focused on. During the 1920s, all of the Army staff schools were focused on how to defeat the Germans in trench warfare, when we were probably never going to see that type of combat ever again. So he said, okay, what I need to do is I need to say, all right, I need to get these guys out of the classroom. I need to get them focused on a basic standard level of competency that will work across different operational environments. And we need to incorporate something in the curriculum that can be adapted to any future threat that we meet. And what might those future threats be? What might they look like?
Wow. See, that's smart. I mean, it's just, it's like if you always go on, you have to progress, not go back. You have to still take lessons from before, right? But learn to get into that. And Nancy was talking about that when she was reading the book about, did we know how to fight in the swamps of, of Vietnam and Korea? And then that goes back to, well, didn't we learn some things? I shouldn't say we, because I wasn't there, but Didn't our military learn like doing things like in the Louisiana maneuvers? Wasn't that part of
Mhm.
learning? I mean, wasn't that World War II? Am I getting messed up? That
No, I mean, that
uh
was World War II, the Louisiana maneuvers.
yeah,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
they went through swamps, and you
Mhm.
don't want to be in the swamp in Louisiana. I've been there. I love it, but you're going to get your leg bitten off by a gator. But you know, you do need to learn all those things, and they do.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's interesting we have all those things, but it seems like for Vietnam, we were not prepared as well compared to World War II, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'd say that the professionalism of our soldiers going into it was head and shoulders above what we started with in World War II. It's
Okay.
just at the strategic level, they really couldn't clearly communicate what our objectives were, and not only that, the military in a very real sense was being hamstrung by a lot of rules of engagement that discouraged initiative instead of promoting it. You know, to
Oh,
say nothing of the fact that we were engaging in a full-scale, high-intensity conflict that was expected to be fought on the cheap. There was going to be no widespread mobilization of the National Guard or the Army Reserve, and not only that, you were pursuing a lot of personnel policies that were undermining unit cohesion. You know, whereas in World War II, you would send a unit overseas, and that unit more or less would stay intact throughout the entirety of the war, you know, minus maybe a few replacements that were brought in here and there to replace, you know, some of the soldiers who were tragically killed. But, you know, you had a different approach in Vietnam, where you not only had a big swath of the population that could apply for and get some draft deferments, but you had these soldiers going in and out of theater on a 1-year rotational basis. And by the time they even survived to the 1-year mark, if they did survive that long, you know, they would take all the knowledge and know-how and, you know, every bit of useful information of what the enemy was doing and how to survive, they would take it with them back to the civilian world. And they would say, okay, well, you know, the next guy who takes my place will have to figure it out. You know, there was no mechanism to keep a lot of the good experienced soldiers in there longer so they could teach the incoming people how to do it better than they could.
oh.
Wow.
So he walks
Mm,
in, Paul Gorman walks in and goes, "We're changing this. We're gonna
mm.
fix it and take some initiative." Nancy said that he snuck over. Where is it? He went to Germany, Nancy? Where did he went to another place that he was supposed to be at one point? He just said his papers were in the mail because he decided he wanted to go
Oh,
to
yeah,
one.
he went to San
Yeah,
Francisco, and because he
Oh,
was gonna go, yeah, he went to San Francisco
yeah.
to join a troop that he wanted to join. He just, no, I'm going by.
and just said his
He
papers were in the
just went
mail.
there
What was that
and
about?
showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I
righty.
like it.
So yeah, so if
But we
we
like stories like that. I mean, come on, it's
Yeah.
uh
like you have to. That's bullshit. Like to,
it
you
is.
know.
It is. So yeah, if we wind the clocks back to 1952, he was fresh out of the infantry officer basic course, and he really wanted to go to Korea. But it turns out that every graduating lieutenant in his class had been put on bulk orders to Germany, and Germany is about as far away as you can get from Korea before you start coming back.
Mm,
And he said, okay, well, the war is in Korea. That's where I want to be. I don't really want to go to Germany because there's nothing happening in Germany. I don't want to do, you know, I don't want to do, you know, these guard tours along the Iron Curtain or what have you. I really want to go where the action is. So what he decided to do is he said, okay, I'm going to very clandestinely disobey that order. I'm going to put myself on a train to San Francisco to Camp Stoneman, which
mm.
is the main hub for replacements going in and out of Korea. And I'm going to go up to the camp personnel officer and I'm going to say, hi, my name is Paul Gorman. I should be on orders to Korea. And then the personnel officer looks at his little clipboard and says, Gorman, I don't see that name on here. Are you sure you have orders to go to Korea? I don't see your name anywhere on my list. And he said, well, okay, let me call the G1 at the Pentagon, you know, let me call like the actual chief of the personnel division at the Pentagon, and you know, I'll get this all sorted out. So, you know, Gorman goes to a payphone or whatever it is, you know, gets on the horn with you know, with the personnel office at the Pentagon and says, hi, my name is Paul Gorman. I'm here at Camp Stoneman right now. That's where I'm calling you from. I'm supposed to be on orders to Korea, but the guy here at Camp Stoneman does not have my orders to go to Korea. Can you please send him some orders? And, the person on the other end, is probably thinking to himself, gosh, I don't know what caused this snafu. Yeah, man, I'll have your orders in the mail. We will send them right over. We'll wire them over if we have to. And then he gets off the phone with him, goes back to the personnel office at Camp Stoneman and says, "Hey, I just got off the phone with the Pentagon, and yeah, they're going to send my orders right over." And and the personnel officer at Camp Stoneman says, "Well, son of a gun, I just got a call from them too. They said, hey, sorry for the slip up, but they're going to send your orders right over." And it was like maybe a week or two later that he was on a boat to Korea to go to the front lines. And, he said in retrospect, he said, at some point, the Army was probably well aware of what I was doing, and they were probably well aware of this ruse. But Mike, you have to keep in mind, it was so rare for anybody who wanted to go to Korea that no questions were ever asked.
Yeah, they're probably like, I don't know what's wrong with that dude, but go ahead and let him go.
I have a feeling that you don't ever want to get into like a prank war with him. Like,
Oh, no.
When we first got to this country and we lived in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and we had a friend, young couple, married couple that moved in with us for a while. They were just getting their feet on the ground as a couple, and they moved in, and Carl is a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Just got out of being a SEAL. And I swear you'd come home and he would be hiding in a doorway in a very odd position. Like it was sneak attack. Whenever we came home from whatever we were doing, like he'd be on the roof or he'd be hiding somewhere that you don't know and just go surprise. It was like Peter Sellers. It was totally like, and his wife his wife couldn't stand it. I don't know if they're still married.
I don't know if they're still married.
And we were like, oh yeah, what's going to happen now? So you had to be so aware, but he was so silent. No, it was Navajo, Blackfoot Navajo guy too.
Really? Okay.
Like, don't mess with him, man. Carl you do not mess with him. And there was I was going through one situation where somebody's like, listen, Lisa, I have a knife. And I'm like, no, Carl. He's like, you got to do this. I'm like, no, you can have a disagreement with someone without a knife. But he was really, really one of those, and I kind of feel like Paul Gorman is one of those, like, if he wants to totally prank you on something, he's going to do it and do it well. Yeah.
Would not surprise me.
Yeah.
Would not surprise me.
But it's interesting he didn't want to go to Germany, but then he ended up in Germany and started a winery after going to Germany and enjoying wine in Germany.
He sure did. Yeah. So yeah, he actually did 2 tours in Germany. So the first one was not too long after Korea. He got there and he commanded an armored infantry company. And this was really the first sustained look that he was able to get at post-war Germany. And he was commenting on just how much the West Germans had rebuilt since the end of the Second World War. And he said they weren't entirely back on their feet yet, but you could tell that life was slowly getting better for Germans of every stripe. And it was incumbent upon us, the Americans, to try to build long-lasting ties with the West Germans and to say, hey, we really are committed to being your friends. And, for no other reason, let's please get along and cooperate, because we know the Red Menace that's just on the other side of the inner German border.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, while he was doing this, I think that was also the first sustained look that he had, to the German vineyard industry, because when he would get up early in the morning to go for his PT runs, he would often run through the long and winding rows of the vineyards, and he was saying, man, this is really nice. It's pretty. It smells fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that this is something that, that I would like to do as time goes on. And when he got back to Germany a little over 20 years later, when he was commanding a division there, that really just reinforced it, that there was something that he and Ruth, his wife, wanted to do after they eventually left the military. And the Cardinal Point Winery, that is a very well-known place. I mean, that is a landmark for all of the vineyards on the Eastern Seaboard today.
We're going. It's on our list. We just drove through Maryland, Virginia, and we got lost in Maryland and Virginia right outside DC at night, and ended up driving through Manassas the day that we were airing the show. Yeah. No, I mean, totally twirled around. Yeah. I don't know how we got out, but we did. And but if I knew there was no, it was they were GPS was sending us because of car accident. I was just like, okay. And if I had just known about the winery at that time, I would have said, Nancy, let's
Just
just
go
go to
park
the
there.
winery. But when we're going to go there, when we go back
Yeah.
east, we're going to do that. But we were trying to get out of the cold. As you know, in Minnesota, it's
Oh,
that
yeah.
season, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We're in
Mm.
Florida. We left
I'm
Northeast
jealous.
It's nice
Pennsylvania.
here.
It was like 20 degrees with wind and snow going, and we're like, we're going to Florida. And like I went as fast as I could because I love Northeast Pennsylvania. It's not a knock on anything, but
Yeah.
man, Florida's
Yeah.
really quite nice. But all right, well, when this airs, we'll be in Asheville getting cold again. So there we go.
Okay, well, that's
But
good.
I know, thanks. But I
Thanks.
think that's really interesting about his career. I mean, you got to think about from West Point to Korea, you know, Vietnam, then, you know, going in and then looking at his work. Didn't he, you know, the Pentagon Papers, that's huge.
That's
Right.
Peace
big.
treaties is huge, the Paris
Mhm.
peace treaties. But didn't he also do some kind of work in regards to going over to Mexico and looking what was going on with the cartels? Or is that his connection with the CIA? What was going on there? I want that
Okay.
scandal.
Alrighty. So let's see. So if we fast forward a little bit to 1983, and at this point, Paul Gorman is actually getting very close to his mandatory retirement date. He's been in uniform collectively for a little over 33 years at this point.
Wow.
And he is offered command of one of the geographical combatant commands known as the U.S. Southern Command, or as it's more popularly known, Southcom for short. And Southcom's area of responsibility is everything in Latin America from the end of Mexico all the way down to the tip of South America at Tierra del Fuego, and also includes most of the Caribbean. So if we take a look at what was happening throughout all of Latin America in the 1980s at this point, we see that Paul Gorman really has his work cut out for him because, you know, I mean, you know, South America is a hotbed of not only illegal drug cartels, but also there's a lot of communist subversion going on.
Yeah.
And this is a clandestine war that is going on, and it's really not making headlines to the degree that many of our other major conflicts have. So, you know, just to give you a summary of everything that is facing the Southcom area at this point, you know, throughout in the early 1980s, you know, you have Guatemala that is still in the midst of a civil war. You have El Salvador that's being overrun by communist guerrillas. The Sandinistas have taken over Nicaragua. Honduras and the Salvadorans have been going at it like cats and dogs for years. You have communism in Cuba. You have a Marxist government that has just stood up in Grenada. You know, you have in Panama, you know, Manuel Noriega. He has an ongoing love-hate relationship with the U.S. You have drug cartels in Colombia. You have drug cartels they're actually operating throughout most of Central America at this point. You have Argentina that still hasn't recovered from the Falklands War. And then meanwhile, right across the border,
I'm getting tired.
It's a mess.
No wonder they're all taking cocaine. There's a lot of work.
It's a mess.
And then you know, to add insult to injury, right across the border in Chile, you have Augusto Pinochet, who's ruling Chile with an iron fist. And it's like, man, is there any part of Latin America at this point that is not going to be problematic for me? You know, as he's coming in to take command. So he says, okay, well, the first thing I have to do is, the first thing I have to tackle, the first thing that's going to be a big priority for me from a military standpoint is trying to deter the communists from further expansion inside of Latin America. So what I have to do is I have to deter the Cubans, I have to deter the Soviets, and I have to deter the Nicaraguans from spreading their ideology by force. So I said, okay, well, how do I do that and still stay below the threshold of sending in conventional forces? So what he does is he increases the capability of the friendly Latin American countries. He increases their military capabilities to say, okay, well, I'm going to give you guys, I'm essentially going to give you guys equipment that you've never had before. I'm going to give you the top quality military equipment from America that we're allowed to sell you. And I'm going to increase your ability to fight at night. See, the thing that separates the American military from a lot of other militaries out there is that we own the night, and we have direct capabilities and a very big technological support apparatus to help us fight and engage the enemy at night. And it's going to help you guys out, one, because that's when the communist guerrillas fight the most. They fight at night, and the drug cartels, all of the traficantes, they all tend to fight at night too. So when we teach you these night fighting abilities, and when we give you these night vision devices, we're going to teach you how to take care of these threats internally on the dime and with the full logistical backing of the U.S. government. And that right there is what laid the foundations for a lot of the big disruptions within the drug trafficking industry down there. And it also what helped pave the way for the Contras victory against the Sandinistas, and also the victory in defeating the communist guerrillas in El Salvador. And there were a lot of very good, interesting stories about what happened at that point. You know, one particular story was involving a country down there, Peru, that had imported a bunch of Soviet-built helicopters, but at the same time they also imported some night vision and night optics from the U.S. So Paul Gorman was now straddled with the unenviable task of trying to teach the Peruvian Air Force how to adapt its American-made night vision devices to a Soviet-built helicopter, and try to teach the Peruvians how to use it without being detected by the Soviet advisors who were operating in that country. So yeah, and I won't spoil it for anybody who hasn't read the book yet, but just suffice to say that there were some very clandestine operations going on that were happening under the cover of night, getting technical and support crew into the Peruvian air bases and trying to teach them how to use their equipment without being detected by the Soviet advisors, because that would have been I think that would have been an international incident of epic proportions if, here in Peru, an American technician crosses paths with a Soviet aviation advisor, and
But this is, it's so interesting.
It would not
to
have
me.
been pretty.
No,
How we get internet, like, here we get the Soviet, you were talking about this with the F-14s, F-15s, how they end up in the enemy hands. Like, how things travel, and then next thing you know, hey, we've got, Russian gear, we're going to go after the Russians with it. Like, or Soviet, it's like, that's some crazy stuff. I mean, are there like actual buyers and sellers of all the, like, there's department stores have the buyers. I mean, does the military
I think you have buyers and sellers of everything.
Like, do they have a salesperson going on, hey, I think I'll sell this to Iraq, and hopefully we won't have a war in the next 5 years.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Well, as a matter of fact, one of the things that we were educated on when I was in the military was how to prepare for what they call FMS, foreign military sales, and it is no big secret to anyone who's serving that at one point or another you very may well have to act as an advisor, or you may have to act as a trainer for a foreign military proponent who is using American gear that has been sold to them either by General Dynamics or Lockheed or any variety of any of those defense contractors there. And it's largely understood that if you're on friendly terms with this particular country today, they're going to get some of your military equipment. Granted, it won't be to the same quality and caliber as the domestic models you're using, but those export variants, wherever those export variants are sent, there's either an American technician who is a representative of the company that sold it, and there's an American military advisor that's giving that is giving the technical know-how of how to employ that system in combat.
Wow. And then there's also the mafia seems to always be poking their nose in somewhere.
Yeah,
I mean, they really.
After this recording, we have a question for you on that, because
sure.
It's interesting. But I do, what's interesting, talking about Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving dinner last night. We were talking with some friends, and we were talking about your book actually, and then talking about the whole what was going on in Mexico and everything. And we were talking about Russia and the Soviet, like with the Chinese and the Soviets, like as Americans, that's the two things, be wary. And and I was saying, well, that's interesting because when we lived in Mexico, there was a whole bunch of Russians, and I was wondering, is there a connection where, I mean, maybe they just moved there and wanted to set up life and grow vineyards, because they do, There are several great wineries owned by Russians. They're great. But
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering about that history when you think about communism and everything, what was going
Right.
on. Like, did the Russians go over there at one point, like just through Central and South America
Oh yeah.
as part, was that part of a thing in history of we're going to go in this way and kind of
Yeah.
settle or spread, like take over? What was going on? Like, how did
Well,
that happen?
Mhm.
well, they had quite a few Soviet advisors who were setting up shop all throughout Latin America. You know, I mean, you had at
Huh.
any given point, you, at any given point, you had quite a few in Cuba. You know, you also had Soviet advisors in Grenada. Pretty much anywhere where there was a pro-Marxist government or there was a
Mm.
pro-Marxist movement afoot, you would have Soviet advisors there.
Mm.
And also, even if the country was at least nominally capitalist, if they were using Soviet-built equipment, yeah, you had one or two Russian advisors over there at any given point who were, you know, overseeing the delivery, overseeing the training and the implementation of equipment, you know, stuff like that.
It's like
Interesting.
even when we lived in different parts of Africa, the Russians were always there.
Mhm.
Always.
Yeah, and they do make good wine.
Yeah,
Apparently vodka,
but
no, but
you know,
wine, they're good.
and they I mean it starts with having a embassy or consulate, you know,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and then expands from there. you know.
Wow. But Paul Gorman, man, what a life. This is epic. I mean, this is an
Yeah,
epic
he
story. I
did a
can't wait to
lot.
get reading it because, you know, Nancy did kind of like everything here. He did this and then he did that and then
I
he did
think
this
well,
and then
I
he
think
did
it should
that.
be a textbook in schools. I'm
I
really a
think so.
proponent of getting rid of the dried, boring textbooks that history classes make you try to read and understand, because it's not presented in a way that's meaningful. So I
Mhm.
would like to see your books and some of the other authors,
Well, she was talking
history
about
authors.
excellence. She said like
It-
with Hal Moore, the leaders, the excellence in leadership, that this
Yeah.
also ties in Danger for
Mhm.
Paul Gorman. I mean, do you think they met? I always think somebody would like they might have because
Well, they
you
have
know.
a certain
Yeah.
set of principles that
Yeah.
they stand by, and that guides them to make decisions that fall in line with their principles. They don't very often wave over and go, well, this is the easier thing to do.
Mhm.
They don't do that. They're like, no, we're going to do it this way because of this, that, and the other. And they
Mhm.
stick to it regardless of what happens to them um, in their careers. They have
Right.
that ability
Moral.
to like, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do, as opposed to if I do this, it's going to hurt my career. They're like, no, this is the right thing to do. They have higher ideals and they see in the future. They have a big picture
Right.
that is more than them. It's more
Mhm.
than their career. It's a picture for how they see the world. It's a picture of who's, that we want democracy to win.
Right.
They have that as opposed to just their personal advancement, which is a
Correct.
big thing when you're looking at leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So
I say they run for, no,
Oh,
but
I
did
think
you, did they meet? Do you think they ever met?
I'm sure they probably met at one point. You know, I never
Mm.
asked Gorman if he met Hal Moore or not,
Yeah.
but you know, given just how close they were to the front lines of rebuilding the army
Mm.
in the wake of the Vietnam War, I'm sure they must have crossed paths at least once or
Yeah.
twice.
At least
They
talked.
probably
You know.
know
Yeah.
or would know who each other
Mm.
is.
Oh yeah.
He needs a museum too. He
Mhm.
needs a museum. Paul Gorman. Maybe they have a section at the winery dedicated to him.
I would hope so.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know.
We're gonna go.
I don't know when we're
Okay.
going to go, but we're going to go because,
Well,
we'll
good.
end up out there again. But,
Yeah.
very, very fascinating. Well, we look forward to the next one. Tell everybody what the next book is because I mean, it's just like
Okay.
how are you doing all of this? My
Man.
gosh.
That's the only thing I'm good at.
It's your
Oh,
well,
I'm
you're
sure that's not
definitely good
true.
at it, but I know that's not true. But I mean, this is amazing, and the stories are really good, and just you just keep going,
Well,
and
and also very readable because it's not an easy
that's why I say you make
subject
it so
to
accessible
read.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's readable, and your books are readable and
Like Skybreak.
memorable. They're not like I say, the history text that you had to read
Mhm.
as a kid that was just like, oh geez, let me out of
Right.
class. Can I now be truant or something?
Yeah, because I look at
Yeah.
Skybreak. Skybreak is still, I mean, that was just
Mm.
epic, you know, and I like that book. And how's that going? Because I know that's
Oh,
got
it's
to be
going
well
great.
received. I knew it would
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
cool.
Awesome.
So
It's
next,
gotten great
combat
reviews
story.
so far.
I've
Yeah.
got it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like every other day, something good's going. I'm like, man, you
Mm.
are working hard and it's paying off. I see a lot of action going out there on Twitter and everything. And it's so cool to see such a good following on your YouTube. You do a lot on YouTube.
I do.
Man,
Yeah, I got it.
man,
Yeah.
you're
Cool.
working it. He's working it. But yeah, next is combat stories.
Actually, it's called the Combat Diaries.
The Combat
and,
Diaries. There we go.
Yep,
Yeah.
and that is a collection of short stories from a variety of veterans from World War II. And and what I tried to accomplish with the Combat Diaries is really just take a cross section of the typical veterans who served in that conflict. And you know, within these 24 stories that I have recorded for this book, they're veterans sharing their experiences fighting on the front lines, and it runs a pretty wide spectrum. You know, there's one story who was a pilot at Midway. You know, then I have another story of a man who was the first man on Omaha Beach. I have a story of a man who's rather small in stature, but he's small but mighty. He was a ball turret gunner on a B-17, and you had to have a small body in order to fit inside that turret. So even though he was only about 5'3", 5'4", just incredible stories that he has to tell. You know, he would tell stories about engaging these German pilots, you know, from the ball turret. And he said that sometimes they were so close, it felt like I was firing at point blank. And they were so close that I could actually see the color of their hair and the color of their eyes.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. Yeah, and then there was another gentleman who was a who was a crewman on a B-24. He got shot down over Germany and spent the remainder of the war inside of 3 different German POW camps. And
oh wow!
And I mean, my God, just the fact that he lived to tell that story is just beyond incredible. And then after that, I'm pretty much taking the same construct, and I am applying it to the Vietnam War. And so for that follow-on project after the Combat Diaries is a book called Blood Alley. And that is a story that pretty much follows the same construct, except they're telling the frontline stories of men who fought on the front lines in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And two of the prominent characters that I can share with you for that book, one is a gentleman named Dan Crowley, and he was a combat engineer who coincidentally was also at the Battle of Bong Trang, and his battalion, his engineer battalion, was attached to Paul Gorman's unit.
Okay.
So small world.
Wow. Yeah.
Small world. And then there is another gentleman who was featured in that book. His name is Tom Mccullough, and Tom's claim to fame, really, and I don't know if this is the best way to describe it. It's just the best analogy that I can think of right offhand. He's pretty much the anti-Ron Kovic, and in that he was injured in a similar way that Ron Kovic was. But instead of becoming anti-war and writing memoirs like Born on the 4th of July, he was pro-war throughout his entire life, and he attended pro-war rallies as a wounded veteran. And and then not only that, and not only that, he went on to become the president of the Boys and Girls Club after the war.
Wow.
Wow. Who knew? Wow.
That's different.
Very interesting, man. This is always something, you know, everybody's stories. I love that you're sharing the stories of those who fought. And everyone, again, McGuardia.com is a website. You can get his book Danger Forward on Amazon and all Goodreads, all those places. Go check it out. But also just go to McGuardia.com, follow him on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Those are the 3 main places, right? Yeah, you don't do Instagram. I'm going to get you on Instagram. Come on.
I think I'll do it one of these days.
Come on to the other side.
Okay.
No, but anyway, always good. So looking forward to our next conversation with you. That will
always
for January. So we'll be talking
Mm.
about Pearl Harbor and Afghanistan, and look forward to that. So thank you so much, Military Mike. Everyone keep up with us at bigblendradio.com, and watch out for Mike's segments every first Monday here on Big Blend Radio.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Lisa,
you.
Nancy. It is always a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank